Over the past few years, I have come across many resources that have helped me to learn a lot about Mexican culture, to develop my Mexican accent, and to learn a lot of Mexican words and phrases. Let's start with podcasts, and one of my favorite podcasts to learn Mexican Spanish is called the How to Spanish Podcast. This podcast is completely in Spanish, and the hosts are Ana y David, and they talk about a variety of different topics that are all related to Mexico. As well, they share tips for language learning. The episodes are around 25 minutes long, and here are just a few of them. Un símbolo muy mexicano, los mariachis. Descubre México, parte 3, Guanajuato y Chiapas, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing those correctly because Mexican names are still very hard for me to pronounce. And Los Mexicanos cocinan con esto. The next podcast that I really love to learn Mexican Spanish is called Doorway to Mexico. Now, this podcast is very unique because it is following a family that is traveling through Mexico, and you get to hear them having conversations with the different Mexicans that they encounter. They have conversations at the airport when they are talking to their taxi driver. They have a conversation about asking directions, negotiating prices in a Mexican market, and even about health when one of them gets sick and they have to go to the pharmacy in Mexico. These conversations are also very interesting because each member of the family has a different level of Spanish. So the father speaks a lot of Spanish, and then the wife doesn't speak that much Spanish at all, and then the daughter speaks quite a bit of Spanish. So you will hear some English and you will hear some Spanish. After you hear these conversations, you will then hear a discussion in between the family and their Mexican Spanish teacher, and then the teacher's explaining to them the different words and phrases and the meaning behind them of the conversation that they just had. Now, onto YouTube. One YouTube channel that I love to watch is called Easy Spanish. This channel has street interview style videos where you are going to be watching the hosts have authentic conversations about a variety of different topics. This is another great resource to learn about Mexican culture. They have conversations about what makes you feel Mexican. What can you get for $5 in Mexico? 4 best ways to say I would like in Spanish. Some other great resources that I like to learn Mexican Spanish have come from TV shows and movies. One show that you should definitely watch is called Tijuana. This show follows the lives and the careers of different journalists that work for a newspaper company in Mexico called Frente Tijuana. There are many conversations that the journalists have with different people around Tijuana because they are trying to uncover the truth and investigate a murder of a politician. Another show is La Falsa Identidad. This show follows 2 strangers, Diego and Isabel, as they are trying to escape some problems that they're having in Mexico. And they are pretending that they are married. Now, some other shows that you should add to your list are Heavenly Bites Mexico, Ingobernable, El Senor De Los Cielos, and Teresa. Some of these shows I found on Netflix, and other ones like Teresa I found on YouTube. For Mexican movies, I have Como Caído del Cielo and La Dictadura Perfecta. Next up, we have Instagram. There's one account that I follow that is owned by Abelardo Campuzano, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he is quite the famous Mexican content creator that makes a lot of skits about the Hispanic family. So many of the skits show what it was like growing up in a Hispanic home, and he impersonates the Hispanic mother, the Hispanic father, the Hispanic tío or the uncle, also the Hispanic child. They are very funny, and he uses a lot of slang. Some other great applications that you can use to learn Mexican Spanish are language exchange applications like HelloTalk and Tandem. So now, instead of just consuming Mexican content, you can have conversations with native Spanish speakers and from a lot of different cities in Mexico. I love these applications a lot because they make it really easy to connect with these Mexican Spanish speakers. As well, you can communicate with them in different ways. So you can just text them, you can send voice recordings, or you can call them as well. If you don't feel ready to have interactions like these with Spanish speakers from Mexico, you can also use a platform like Italki where you can have a conversation with a Spanish teacher or a Spanish tutor. And you can filter down these teachers and tutors so they are only for Mexico. I have a few videos on my channel here where I have an Italki lesson with a Mexican tutor, so you can check those out. I'll link a few of them down below in the description box. As well, I'll put the link to the Mexican tutor that I had. Spanish radio stations are also a very great resource for learning Mexican Spanish. Now, this may depend on where you live. I'm not sure if there's a Spanish radio station in every single city in the United States, but I live in San Antonio, Texas, and there are many Spanish radio stations that are hosted by Mexicans. I love listening to the radio in Spanish because there are so many topics that are covered, and I can listen throughout the day when I'm driving. So there are some radio stations that are dedicated just to talking about the news or about politics, about the weather, and there are some where there are hosts, right? And they're just having conversations about work and a whole bunch of other random topics and about romance and relationships. Of course, we can't forget about our Spanish radio stations that play music. I've been listening to a lot of different genres of Mexican music for the first time. There's banda, corridos, norteñas, mariachi, cumbia, and ranchera. And with music, I'm able to learn a lot about Mexican culture and learn new slang. These are my favorite resources to learn Mexican Spanish, and I really hope that they help you on your journey to learn Mexican Spanish. Now, let me know in the comment section below what are some of your favorite resources to learn Mexican Spanish. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share it with your language learning friends.